It's the first time that I think that users are ahead of corporates in getting excited with the technology.
Trust is so fundamental to how we interact with our customers as well, which is so important in the world of AI.
We don't have a crystal ball, but that is crystal.
It's a jewel.
I'm going to use
a
it.
jewel.
If that was a ball, perhaps I'd have my answer.
Hello, my name is Jesper Schleimann. I'm the AI officer for SAP in the EMEA region. This is AI Voices. Joining me today is Michael Jacobides and Una for a short conversation around AI. But before we jump to the future, let's start with the present. Obviously, a lot has gone on in the past couple of years in the area of AI. What really excites you, and where are the areas where you have seen true impact from AI in present day?
Thanks, Jesper. I think for me, there's three areas that things have just fundamentally changed, and I'm so excited about the changes that have happened. Our customer and employees have totally different expectations. They're nothing like they were even 5 years ago. Trust is so fundamental to how we interact with our customers as well, which is so important in the world of AI. And I think all of that is bubbling together to show us that just how we experience our day-to-day for work is just fundamentally different, and even in our day-to-day as consumers and people that live in the world. At Vodafone, we went quick and we went fast on AI, and we went at scale, and we're very proud of that. But we made some mistakes along the way. We went too quick in some cases. We tested every possible model, but we're now at the place where we have really great governance, a platform approach, and we're seeing real impact on cases with our customers. We have Super Toby launched in all of our European markets, which is an agentic Gen AI setup where we are seeing incredible throughput in terms of how our customers are getting solutions to their questions and queries, and huge impact in how happy customers are in dealing with Vodafone, which is the crux of why we're here. And then for our employees, we've launched our HR agents internally. We see about 80% of those queries resolved through those agents, which is, again, a fantastic situation to be in. So there's real impact. And underneath that, we understand how important it is, as I said, around trust. So making sure that we are doing things with ethics and integrity, that we're really thinking about the security, how we're governing the data, and what we're doing with the output of those agents and those Gen AI solutions. So it's a totally different place from even 3, 4, 5 years ago.
And I think trust is truly the vector of AI, and we'll definitely also come back to that when we talk about leadership.
Well, I'll take a slightly different take, and let's take a bit of a step back. Why is it that we're all excited about AI? The main reason is that we now have a different branch of AI, generative AI, that is changing people's lives. Now, AI is computational statistics, and for a long time, it was very unsexy. It was figuring out what you expect to happen, all of that fun optimization stuff, and you had production scheduling, and you understood how you would organize your hospitals better and allocate their capacity, and the rest of it. And then we're like, oh, we can use it for things like imaging and diagnostics. Is this a cancer or is it benign? An interesting thing happened, and we started moving very quickly in AI being able to digest and then spit out data and images. I will create something that will statistically look like what you asked. Why is this important? It creates stuff. So from recognition of patterns, understanding the world, we went to creation of stuff. So this technology is different and has allowed us to do things that we can viscerally feel as individuals. Here we're speaking about something which is not just the use that we do day by day. And forgive me, but I think that the uses are still more important on personal level than it is in the corporate level. So what I think we hear Una say is how an organization can adapt them. Although I think that an even bigger transformation is that we, users of Claude and ChatGPT, see what is the potential of this technology. It's the first time that I think that users are ahead of corporates in getting excited with the technology. But I don't know how that plays in. What does it look like in your world, Una?
I think it's a great observation, Michael. I mean, our workforce is coming in with expectations of these tools need to work for us. They need to be easy. They need to make our day-to-day cool. And I think the reality is they're not taking jobs away from they're changing how we're doing jobs. And us adapting and thinking about how do we bring that through to our consumers, our customers, our employees. You're exactly right. Learning from where people are at the front of the wave and corporates are catching up is spot on. I think where we're seeing it is really trying to make sure that we are getting this out quickly, we're experimenting, and then we're improving as we go. So rather than try and get it perfect, we're learning and adapting and releasing, and with all the right safeguards to protect our customers, of course. But we're trying to move at pace and then learn from that and build better as we release to our customers.
And it's kind of fun because I think that if you look at the uses of, say, Gen AI and the service that we have, still the biggest use that we had in 2025 was, I think, finding purpose in life, followed
Personal
by therapy
therapy.
and
Yeah.
companionship. And coding is something like number 5. So I think that, we've got this really interesting thing where companies are saying, oh my God, this really is important. But it's a technology that has developed for no good reason, in the sense that in the first time in history of technology, you had a lot of money that was given by people who gotten rich in the previous tech surge saying, I want to win this. And I want to win this without thinking about what the product is, without thinking about monetization. And now everyone, we as individuals, as well as companies, are thrust in this world where we have a technology that can transform us, but we're all trying to navigate our way around it and trying to say, well, how can we use it?
And I think that's one of the mature questions, right, that naturally comes as a new technology is introduced, a general purpose technology moving to be more purpose specific. Among the top 3 questions I hear and the challenges when I talk to customers are really, number 1, where are the value cases? How does it incrementally move the needle from our organization, not just on a personal level, and especially moving from what I call coffee cup level productivity, things that saves you 4 or 5 minutes a day where you can go get a cup of coffee, to the beginning of 20, 30, 40%. And this has some other requirements. I think that's an interesting part. Of course, trust is important, but fundamentally, this is a challenge I'm seeing, right? And how do you connect the dots from a great new technology that we can see personally, the use cases, into use cases at scale inside an enterprise that delivers value?
So I think you're spot on. And we found exactly the same challenges when we started. And as I said, everyone was experimenting everywhere. The excitement was infectious. And some people had wonderful ideas and others were, editing their documents with it. And I'm a big believer in that. It's fundamentally changed the way I show up and prepare for my day to day. But we very quickly realized we had to put some structure and order around it. So we innovate and we proof of concept in team and we scale globally. That's very much how we do it now. We have AI governance boards. Don't slow things down. They're there to make sure that the funding and investment and everything that we need is in place. And that's meant that, we've been able to launch things like you talk about coding, but one of my favorite examples is our sales teams are now able to prepare responses to proposals in a matter of hours because we've done simple things like build a bank of historical responses, use Gen AI to create the new content for the response. That saved them weeks of time, and it's phenomenal. It's thinking with the broad brains in the room to think, how could this technology help us at scale change how all of our different types of employees and workforces are working? But it's so exciting.
And I think it's definitely one of the things as we're moving along from this standalone, I would say call it technologies, use some technical jargon, we need to think about embedding it into the way value is accrued or delivered in the P&L of enterprises. And that's typically in business processes, right? To connect it in there, also to give it the context. So you have the action and the context. I think this is the thing. And that's not always so easy. You mentioned governance as one thing. There's some technical prerequisites that has to be in play. But it really has to become part of the operating system, in my view.
Absolutely. So a couple of things to note. One of the things that I'd say is AI and Gen AI particularly demos well and scales fully. And I think that anyone who's exposed in that will know that the commercial reality is not what comes with the fancy demos that you get and with the promises. And lots of the discussions that we have heard do come from people saying, it's going to be the thing that's going to make you rich. It's the next silver bullet. It isn't. If you see, especially with regards to Gen AI, because I think that much of this discussion is about Gen AI, which is the technology that does many of the impressive things that Una was saying a moment ago. By the way, I think that one of the underappreciated things is that there is benefit when you combine traditional AI with Gen AI, because you have the underlying data that are clean. We may come to that because I think it's super important. But if what we found in terms of organizations is that we separated them up to those who said, tried it, I'm not terribly excited, tried it, okay, to we see some actual value. The first thing is, what do you use it for? If you only use it for the basic cost reduction, I'm going to write emails more effectively, I'm going to be doing my search better, it doesn't really move the needle. If you start using it for things like hyper-personalization, cross and upselling, using it for real cases that you can leverage the things that exist in the organization that we're not taking advantage of, and even more so for new business models, then you start seeing a significant correlation with the value. The other thing that we've seen is that it matters not in terms of the breadth, how many use cases you have, but the depth. Are you doing it systematically? And I think that the reason, when we looked at the qualitative evidence, is you need to start using it not just to say, I can use this fancy tool. So although it's cool to let 1,000 flowers bloom and then find a way to sort them out, we are starting to see some rhyme and reason. And I think that the rhyme and the reason that we're seeing is that you need to combine it properly with your organizational structure. You need to do it in a systematic fashion, and you need to go close to the core of what it is that you're doing, as opposed to saying, hey, see, I got my little use case, so now I can check the box.
I love what you said, and I'll rephrase it. Capability does not mean scalability. And you also mentioned that, Una, how you've been scaling, and maybe that takes us to the next step in the journey. If we look a little bit going forward, how do we successfully scale the initiatives we begin? How do we move from pilots to profits to true impact at scale? And I think one of the things you mentioned was governance in particular, and the role of governance for me kind of becomes the operating system or the path of managing that in a world, or an AI-first world. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, or maybe how you've...
I think it's a great way of putting it, Jesper, because governance to most people makes their soul walk out the building and keep going across the road, because I think they think it's such a bad word, but it's exactly that. It's the operating system of how do we make sure that we are able to scale, get the value embedded in the organization and how we work. We've built a platform called AI Booster. That's ultimately what is governed through this process. That's where our security, our ethics, all of our responsible AI runs through it. We've got some big partnerships. We push for interoperability between our agents. So rather than a plethora of small agents, we think about how do we make sure that we can consider for a future hierarchy of agents as we get into an agentic world. And we have really open, sensible conversations. So we're a telco, so we have networks colleagues, and they're thinking about their use cases in networks and how do we serve our customers better? How do we route our traffic well? How do we predict faults and look to address them before the customers need to pick up the phone? We've got customer ops folks that are, on the front line with our customers. They're dealing with the queries. They're realizing that they need the context of the conversations that our customers have had with us before. We have an ask once proposition that we now talk about. We want our customers to ask us once, and for us to follow the thread too till we solve it. We don't want them to have a call and then explain it again, and then the next time they call, they give us the context again. That's exhausting.
Love that. Ask once.
Exactly. Ask once. Gen AI and agents will be so important in enabling our frontline staff to make sure that we serve up that content and we make it easy for them to get the context of why the customer might be calling before they have to ask the same
And
questions
retain the
again.
institutional memory across 24/7, 365.
And these might seem like such, oh, well, of course you could use it for that. That's a great, but these are the kinds of really sensible things that also spark those moments of greatness and innovation across all the teams, where the momentum builds, people start to see it work and they think, oh, I have got this use case in legal, I've got this use case in finance, I've got this use case in sales. And suddenly you have this real momentum in the organization.
Yeah, and I think making AI the new UI also as a way to truly transform, and with our own Joule Copilot and the native integration also to Copilot, it's really about making sure we are with the users, understanding the context of the user, serving it in the right form for whatever they need. But then, of course, you also need some real impactful stuff. Like, one thing is to just have an empty prompt, but what can I do with that, right? So this is where I found that having more scalable embedded use cases in business processes natively really helps begin moving the needle. And I think for many customers, it's a natural way to start to just activate some of those. And then that will help inspire the development of other areas, right, as we scale going forward.
Well, and let me just complement what Una was saying a moment ago, because what I see organizations doing is twofold. On the one hand, the adoption of AI means that you need to think about your responsibilities, because you now have responsibilities with regard to the customer. We need to think about how that gets as a part and parcel. And this governance issue is important in as much as we also want to have it engaged and embedded in customer interactions. This is where an organization needs to have cleaned up its data act. So this is where some of the things that may sound also esoteric, like I know SAP is working things like single source of truth, understanding what the evidence really is. It's important, especially if you're saying, I will rely on the evidence that I have in order either to make my own decisions. I need to figure out whether I should ramp up production there, and whether this is a profitable way of expanding, or whether this is a good customer. Whether we're speaking about the ERM or the CRM or other parts of the information infrastructure of the organization will be called upon. And if you've got a mess, and if you can't really trust your existing data sources, then you can find yourself in trouble. So I think that what we're going to see is that organizations that were able to get their data and infrastructure house in order will be able to benefit. The others that don't will essentially have a version of garbage in, garbage out, because you don't have the pattern
Yeah, but I
recognition.
think you're spot on. And I think what AI has done, it's like a pressure cooker on that part of the organization, and you're seeing where's it seeping out. I think that any company that has to be successful going forward in an AI-first world have to get their flywheel of how they run their business processes, the data it generates, and that data to ground your AI, and then embed that AI back in turn in business processes in place. So if that flywheel is working from process to data to AI back to process, then that will generate better, faster processes, more data, and then you have the basis of exponential growth. I think that's really the core of what you're talking about, right? And I think that's fundamental going forward. And so we always knew that data was important, but in AI-first world, I think for me, one of the main value levers that AI provides is decision compression and decision scalability. So AI really provides decisions at scale. And here, if you don't rely on your data, then you have a problem. Like it used to be, if you had data and you did analytics, there was still a human in the loop making many decisions. So you had that safeguarding. But in an AI-first world and an agentic world, where decisions are really being pushed and compressed to AI, and you're even more relying on data. And I think this is where, as you said, we're going to see some fast-moving organizations who've had their data house in order, and some who really need to catch up going forward. Yeah.
And I think that is honestly the biggest foundational. I talk about the brilliant basics a lot, but that is the brilliant basic that isn't it? We have been able to move else with AI. We've had a global data strategy for many years. Our one of our crown jewels is within our data lake is our Evo data, which is our global SAP implementation, and the amount that we're driving, because we know it's there. We have a global process teams that run off this that are feeding even more intelligence through into the data. And that, as you said, that flywheel is just absolutely integral to being successful.
And I think in particular, being able to take your proprietary data, as you said, combine that with your operational data, that's what gives you your unique perspective, your unique foundation for decision-making on the world and at scale. So I want to turn a little bit even more about the future expectations, where we're going. I would call it the agentic stage. I would say is the next stage. I think that 2026 is going to be that year at least as I see it from our perspective, truly scaling standardized agents, orchestrating agents, but also finding the right balance between humans and AI agents, or auto sapiens, as I call them. Would love to hear your perspective on that, or where you see we're going now.
Okay, all right. We don't have a crystal ball, but that is crystal.
It's
So
a jewel.
I'm going to
It's
use
a
it.
jewel.
It's a
Right?
prop.
Jewel, fine.
Excellent.
So I don't know. If that was a ball, perhaps I'd have my answer in front of me. No, but this is not a crystal ball. I do think that we are seeing both the technology mature and organizations starting to mature around technology. And I think that we need a little bit of both in order to progress more effectively there. I think that one of the challenges is that there are sometimes difficulties in organizations because the way that the processes need to change is painful. And that requires courage. And like anytime you have a change of that magnitude, I think that we will see 2 steps ahead and 1 step back, or you will see people who will start pushing back against it. Let's be real. People are afraid. They're afraid that they will lose their jobs. They're afraid that this is going to be the end of their careers. And it's true that we're moving into an era that is less known. So, while on the one hand, I am optimistic about what technology can create, I'm also aware that as we shift from writing limericks, getting cooking instructions, understanding how we can do DIY or find a purpose on life better, which is what Claude and ChatGPT can offer, as we move to some inevitable reshuffling in organizations, we will need to think about transformation and change management as much as we need to think about technology.
How do we, Michael, how do we get, maybe also you, Una, how do we get the organization to go with us on that journey? What should we do and act as leaders, right? How do we get that? Because for me, the true value comes when the organization embraces this technology.
I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head. We talk a bit about change as usual now. So who knows what's coming? I think for me, it's trying to unlock for people almost AI as a partner. So, or as a member of your team. So, how do you bring in a setup so that people feel those bits of my job that are a little bit energy sapping, that take time, that if I had the brain power to spend on something else, how do we bring AI into the frame to take those things off the table? I think your point on fear is brilliant, Michael, and I think it's a really astute thing that is the reality of where people feel. But my personal observations is it's changing how we do our jobs. It's not changing that my job exists, but it is changing what I'm spending my time on. And actually, I think that's important because if we just replace everybody, if we ever got to a future, we wouldn't be creating new content. There'd be nothing for the models to learn from, and we'd be quite stuck as a race and as a species. So I think it's really important that we consider how we make AI a partner and a helper and a team member rather than a peer or a replacer. That to me is a very important point.
And pragmatically, you can start by saying, let me try to work and show how the technology can start by resolving some pain points. Because I think that I really think that we are not open enough about the fear that most of us feel that AI is going to replace me. There is something deeply human if you think about the reason that Shelley's work and Frankenstein had such an appeal. If you think about even sort of earlier works around this ability of technology to challenge human, the story of Prometheus to some extent, and stealing the things that should exist in the realm of the gods, it is a very deep concern, and I think that we need to find ways of addressing that head on. And I think that there is, to some extent, oh, don't you worry, but we're not really speaking about it. We're not allowing people to see how that really affects them. We're not teaching them how to engage. But if we don't do that, I think that we'll have some quiet behind the scenes resistance. That means that you get neither the improvements that AI can offer, nor the change that needs to happen. So that is the first thing that I say. The second thing is, when I look at them both descriptively in the research and in the advisory that we do, I would classify the changes in either evolution or revolution. And organizations need to think a little bit about both. Evolution means that especially established organizations need to think about their processes carefully and how to embed AI. Why? Well, first of all, you need to figure out what are the work processes, what are the pain points, and in which way can you make AI congenial to what you expect people to do so that they don't push it back or they don't sabotage it in practice. You also need to make them excited about finding new ways, in addition to giving the guardrails that you mentioned, so that they can find ways of expanding them. And you need to have more realistic expectations, because technology will solve some bottlenecks. The bottlenecks aren't going to move elsewhere. They don't disappear. The ideas that we hear from some of the tech people that we will have a world of infinite abundance are rubbish. It is a problem because we can create advantage, but we cannot use a utopian future that is not founded on reality to counter the fear that people have. So the first thing is, for your processes, figure it out. And the second thing is revolution, because there may be cases, and what I've seen is that you can't really change processes from scratch. But if you have a new product or a new country, do some selective starvation, allow people to use this technology, and then say, I'm not going to give you FTEs, I'm not going to give you budget, but play with this technology, see what you can do with technology, see how you can advance it. So you do a bit of both, a little bit of evolution and some drastic stuff, and you build a portfolio of change management. So for me, it's all about change
Yeah,
management.
and as we move forward, because trust is important, we don't want to lose the trust. It's so easy to lose the trust, and then you move backwards on that adoption curve, right? So it's important for us as well to first introduce the technology in a controlled manner. So that's the first step. So to say standardized agents that you can deploy, because that way allows us control and scale over that. And then to slowly democratize for the extended part, and then move towards a more orchestrated world, let's say the third step. This also goes to the core point. For me, the value as we move forward is still in decisions, business decisions. And then the question becomes, which decisions am I needed in the loop to have that trust? When am I in the loop with the AI, having the decision? And when am I on the loop? Because we're moving to a future where we can see more and more decisions delegated to the AI. And I think you need to first be in the loop to kind of build that personal trust, to relinquish slowly the hands off the steering wheel and see the car understands the context. So I think that's the journey we're heading on.
I'd give one real example of where we are going and where we are in some cases in Vodafone. I'll come back to the ask once example. So you call with a problem and you call again a week later, and the agent has to go back and look at the last ticket and read all the things. That's not a value add experience for either our customers or our employees. We want the agent to summarize and produce the notes from the last conversations. But we also don't want to take the employee, the customer frontline person, out of the loop, because in the moments that really matter, the human response is so important. And we have to be there for our customers and give them those moments that delight or help them through challenging moments. We don't want to outsource that to an identity that is an agent in the background. And I think that that's a really tangible example for us of where the human actually is not just a decision maker, but almost a creator of content and a response that is real and important to our customers.
Making the decision with the customer and also the empathy, which maybe leads me to the last point. So the role of leadership, because I think that's also important. How do we as leaders help our organization lead and move to this transformation? What are the things we should be focusing on? And how can we really help build that trust and shepherd the organization into this age of intelligence?
It's a big question. I think the first is equipping our people with the skills and the knowledge. So give them access, let them experiment, give them real examples. Back to your point on, explain to them what we're trying to do here, bring them on that journey, give them the tangible examples. So, because I always believe most of innovation is increments on somebody else's innovation, and it's the cross fertilization is so important. I think also explaining to them, this is not someone to do your job for you. This is not a thing that is going to come along and suddenly you can sit at your laptop with a cup of coffee every day and your job will just happen for it with an agent. Your role is to think, how do you add value? What are the things you know you're not doing right now because of how your processes and your job is set up that you can now spend time on? And I think then also it's being clear on ultimately how AI feeds the strategy. In Vodafone, our strategy is summarized in 3 words: customers, simplicity, and growth. So we should always be able to hook back what we're trying to do with AI against those 3 priorities. Are we helping our customers? Are we supporting revenue growth? Are we improving the way that our employees are working to ultimately fulfill one of those ambitions? And making it very simple, plain language, no not too much jargon, not too much hyperbolic sentences and statements, I think is for me the fundamental way of how you bring your teams on the journey with you.
So, what is it that leaders need? The first thing I think is humility. There's no sense pretending that you know what's going to happen in a technology that is changing with such speed and showing a false sense of confidence. Um, I also think that you need curiosity, and you need to engage. But beyond that, you need to also help provide a sense of purpose and identity to the people in the organization, to give them the reassurance that this is a process that you are working with them and that you're going to help them go to the other side, because that will create the psychological support, which I cannot stress enough, and it is absolutely indispensable. Then, in terms of some skills, you need to think about yourself as an architect, because you will need to rethink part of the processes that exist in your own organization, and you will need to ask some questions which may be uncomfortable. And thinking about where the ownership of AI lies, how it combines with the existing structures. And, we're seeing that there are new combinations. So, understanding the politics of the transformation is important. Figuring out who has responsibility is crucial, and you need to think about the capabilities that are needed. Now, we don't know exactly what are the capabilities that are needed to complement AI, but you need to be on the lookout to support what the technology offers and what are the complements that you need. And the final thing is that you need to start thinking about your ecosystem of partners. The reason is that this is a technology that is moving so fast that it is impossible that you are going to have either the ability of monitoring the changes or the skills that are necessary to do it inside. You will need to rely more on outside partners, not only as suppliers, but as thought partners, as those who bring you technology that you need to be able to not only pull on the plug, but pull the plug out because it's not working for you. And you need to start learning to operate in an ecosystem, either as a partner or as an orchestrator or a complementer. So I think that this will hasten the requirement for leaders to be a little bit more open-minded and a little bit more forward-looking.
And I think if anything, this technology is a culture-bearing technology. So as you move in and design your ecosystem, you really also have to think about the motives of your ecosystem players. For me personally, as a leader, I'm a true believer in leaning in and understanding the technology, but by using it yourself every single day, and then sharing that, your own concerns and your own challenges on that journey as a leader with your team. And then lastly, also creating safe spaces for that to happen. AI, if anything, amplifies the need for you to be more human as a leader. Because ultimately, for me, it's not about human versus AI or AI taking a job. It's not about demoting the human. And if you think about AI as just being able to do everything for us and we lean back, that's really putting ourselves up for failure. I think it's about promoting humans using AI to make us better. And that, of course, in turn, challenges us on our critical thinking and our ability to decide which decisions should reside with us and which can we outsource. I want to thank you so much, Una, Michael, for sharing your experiences on AI Voices today so generously with our viewers and listeners.
It's been great fun.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for having us.